I'm Tyler Rutledge, and this is The Other Side of Success, where real people share the stories behind the spotlight, the unpolished truth, the price they paid, because the other side of success is where the real story begins. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Beau Beard, an internationally recognized educator, TEDx speaker, author, and the co-founder of The Farm, a cutting-edge health and performance clinic. He's worked with Olympians, special ops, pro athletes, but what really sets him apart is how he integrates movement, mindset, and environmental health into a whole human approach to healing. Let's get into the show. Dr. Beau Beard, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. I just got back from Sedona, so if you're looking at this tan, that's what's going on there.
Hey,
Yeah.
I did notice that you were looking nice and brown, so congrats. I was here for Memorial Day weekend, and we battled a little bit of rain and some storms, but we made it through.
Well, I'm glad to be back where it's actually green. I couldn't live out there where it's just brown.
Desert. Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, Beau, I certainly, man, I thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited for our listeners to be able to hear a little bit about your story, your successes, some of the things that have been super challenging for you in your career, while you've built the businesses that you've built. So with that said, let's get into it. So you and I were talking a little bit before the show, and I know that when you opened the farm, that you mentioned that you almost shut this thing down within the first year. What was going through your head during that season of your life?
Yeah. So a quick, preempt to that is I run the business own the business, I guess, with my wife, Sloan, who is also a chiropractor. So we're chiropractors. We own a clinic that has now been open for 11 years, but we didn't plan on opening a clinic out of school and kind of fell into it and broke down in Birmingham. And there's a whole kind of sequence of events that fell into place to get us in practice. And at no time during all of these events of getting loans and all this, did anything ever go through my mind if we'd fail. It was just like I either had blinders on, I was ignorant to what I didn't know. I don't know what it was. But then you get into business, and we were lucky. We didn't think we were going to have a staff. We got a staff member who's still with us today, Bridget, who is our office manager. And so it was a 3-person shop, and we got humming, right? So the first 6 months we took off, we're seeing patients. We're like, this isn't too bad, right? Like, we had enough to eat and pay bills. And then this happens to a lot of people in our field because you're basically kind of doing everything, even though we had a front office staff, is we got so busy that we didn't have time to go out and market. And I say we didn't have time. Like, I know people are like, oh, you always have time. Like, doesn't seem like a lot, but we were seeing patients from 7 a.m. to like 6 p.m. every day, and then basically going home and eating and not talking to each other because we were just so tired, and then doing all the business stuff for the rest of the night and doing that, ad nauseum. But 6 months hit, and I was like, man, we're not seeing as many new patients. Like, income's going down. We got this, big loan that we're, having to now pay on. And I looked at my wife at one point. I was like, this is not good, man. Like, it's plummeting. And so we started doing networking things, and all of a sudden we're like, marketing for us is like going to the gym, which at that point we now own a gym, but it was a, local gym here. It was trail running, going and doing the things that we're involved in, and obviously being brand aware, like, hey, we're with the farm, but also talking to people. It's not necessarily, it's part of it, but going to a networking event or BNI or whatever, those are fine and dandy. But we realize if we're involved in the community and do the things that enjoy, that exuberance of, hey, we like doing this thing, and we're involved with this like active care lifestyle clinic. And then that's what we did. We're like, hey, we have to make time to do these things. And then when we got back into it, we swung up, and that's something that to this day, it's a win-win, right? Because it's like, if you get busy, what a lot of people do, they neglect their body, their health care, their fitness. And it's like, well, we kind of wrap that into the lifestyle of this company. It's like, well, we cannot neglect that because it literally kills the company, not only our health.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you say that. So you guys opened 2014, right?
Valentine's Day. That's our
I opened my insurance agency July 1st of 2014, and I remember going to a BNI right there at Eagle Point, and seeing Sloan and meeting her, and that's kind of how I got familiar with you guys. And golly, man, I just remember we were very green, all of us, very young, much younger than we are now. I had way less gray hair,
Less kids.
and I had a
Yeah.
zeal for life. Going back to what you said, maybe I was just ignorant. I think as an entrepreneur, you got to kind of go into this thing with a little ignorance, right? Because in my opinion, to be a successful business owner, you got to be a little crazy.
Well, yeah, and we're all ignorant because ignorance just literally means you're unaware of information. But the thing that I've kind of picked up is, you know, any successful entrepreneur is more willing to act on filling in the gaps in that ignorance. And some people are not. They kind of stand in a place of whether it's, apathy or a lack of interest or whatever it is. They don't grow, right, personally and professionally. And then that's kind of the death of whatever business venture, whether that's being, employee someplace or starting your own thing. But you have to do that to kind of stay in business. Well, that's just kind of, I'm sure you're the same way. That's kind of who I am. I'm curious. I want to get better. And then when I see like, I'm not very good at this thing that I'm doing in business, and I was unaware that I'm not good at it because I didn't even know I needed to be. It's like, how do I get better? Or do I need to hire somebody or talk to a friend? Or you got to constantly just, entrepreneur is basically being like a polymath. You just got to do a little bit of everything. And then at some point decide like, I can't do that, or I'm not very good at that. Let's outsource, or, that's the dance,
That's
hasn't
such
changed
a
a
great
whole lot in 11 years.
Man, it's so great. And I just, every time I have these conversations with people, I just get reminded is like, if you're faced with something that you can't do, don't know how to do, but you know you need to do it, you got to figure out how to delegate that quickly. You got to get that to a third party or hire internally, whatever you got to do, because uh, running a business, we just can't do it all.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the farm a little bit. You guys have blown this thing up. It's an incredible clinic, and I can't wait to link it in the show notes for our listeners. But I am a patient of you guys, and I've been around quite a bit. We'll get into you part owning a gym as well. But the
Mm-hmm.
farm, it's a very neat thing. And we're going to go back to the beginning of your story in a minute, but give us a little bit of insight into the farm, what you guys do and what kind of sets y'all apart.
Yeah. So when we say chiropractor, and it's, there's this thing called a curse of knowledge. Like, I know what I do because I'm in the field, but, if I said chiropractor, most people think like, oh, adjust. There's negative connotations wrapped around chiropractors all the way from what's on Family Guy to The Simpsons of they're going to see you 100 times and you're going to go back forever. And, all these, they're woo-woo doctors. But where we're different is, we, so basically I'm a chiropractor. I also have a master's degree in sports science and rehabilitation. And then I'm not certified any longer as a strength conditioning coach, but at one point or another, we all were or are in this office. So we basically round out care with every patient visit. So what that means is you're not just going to a chiropractor. You're not just going to, physical therapy or rehabilitation. You're not just going to strength conditioning. You're trying to, what we would say, bridge the gap between all of those. Pick what is most necessary for the person in front of you, but also like most people need a little bit of all of that at one point in time. And it's just, where does that come in triage? So that's how we're different. We didn't realize coming into Birmingham how underserved that market was, because I assumed with like the Andrew Sports Medicine Institute and Dr. Lee Mack and just kind of the sports arena that we're in, that would be popular, but it was pretty antiquated,
Right.
if I'm being honest. It was very old school, and there's great practitioners here, and it's changed a lot in 10 years, as it should. But yeah, we were kind of a standalone back then. It's more common now what we're doing.
Yeah, I've always considered you guys to be the wizards of chiropractic care. Just incredible what y'all do and how you use functional movement. So let's go back to the beginning, a little bit about young Beau. I know that you've got an incredible story right from the get-go of what this whole podcast is about, the other side of success, the adversity, the pain, the suffering, the lonely moments. You broke your femur when you were a kid. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like the doctors told you that you were done. You weren't going to play sports again. How did that moment feel then? And how did it shape you to help you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So again, hard to think how it felt then now, because it's been, I mean, I'm old. That was when I was 9 years old. But uh, at the time, you have no foresight. You're like, oh, this sucks. I can't play with my friends. I can't,
Mm-hmm.
go play football. But then as I started going to these, I stayed 2.5 weeks in the hospital, had surgery, did, the kind of initiation of the story is I was getting ready to leave the hospital after 2.5 weeks. They had me walk up 3 stairs with my crutches and walk down 3 stairs. That's the most PT or physical therapy rehab I got. And the doctor's like, I assume they thought a rod in this kid's femur, he'll be great. So I go home, and then as I go to follow-up visits, like more and more is coming out. First was, hey, this giant rod in your leg and the screws are supposed to come out. Now it can't because it heals so fast. So you got this lifetime, piece of hunk of metal in your leg. Then the doctor tells me, hey, based on how you're moving at this, 3-month follow-up, like you're probably going to walk with a little bit of limp, and running might not be like a legit thing. Like we're just kind of seeing that things aren't the same because of growth plate structure and when this happened in my life. I mean, you tell that to a 9-10-year-old kid. I mean, that's like, what?
Wow.
And when that wasn't talked about initially, right? This is like only being brought up later. Then we get to the last, I still remember this succinctly. I was supposed to be on crutches for 6 months. I made it about 4, where I was like actually walking around, running around. So my mom followed another follow-up saying like, this isn't right. You got to go see what's going on and make sure this is safe. And I remember the ortho, just, if you can imagine, I'm face down on an exam table and just bent my knee so my heel touched my hip, which it hadn't done in about 6 months. And I'm crying, and he goes, yeah, I think you're good. And, because it hurt so bad. And I was like, so that's it? And he goes, yeah, you don't need the crutches, you're good to go. And that was it. Like,
Wow.
So then I was 10 or 11. So then, fast forward freshman year of high school, what are you, 14? And I'm playing football, and we're watching tape or film after, it was tape at that point, VHS. And we're watching tape after the game. And I had this old Marine special teams coach, and I was running on kickoff team. And he's like, Beard, why are you limping? And I was like, I didn't even know I was. And then like, now I was aware of it. I go out to practice, and I literally would realize it, try to fix it. And I couldn't. Like, it was like this weird, like, why am I limping? And then I met a chiropractor. I mean, this is kind of a long story, but a chiropractor moved to my hometown from Miami, Florida. My hometown is Canton, Illinois. At that point, it was 12,000 people in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
Moves to my town. She doesn't know anybody. She has no family there. She went to the Olympics, was a bronze medalist in judo. Her husband was a trials guy for taekwondo as well. And they started doing these speed camps, like speed and agility camps at our high school, in addition to running a chiropractic practice that also had a gym in it, which is basically what I'm doing today. So she was forward thinking by about 30 years.
Right.
And
yeah.
I go see her when I sprain an ankle one time at football. And she's like, I get the ankle thing, but like, what's going on with this leg? And I told her the whole story. She's like, treated me for free. And she's like, I'll treat the ankle, and then we're going to get after this thing, and basically rehab me up. And, I went on to play football for quite a few more years. And that just opened my eyes to what I had missed, because I still didn't know, right, at that initial post-op time frame, how different her approach was to everybody else I'd talked to. And then I was like, my God, what if I wouldn't have had those 3-4 years at a crucial developmental time of missing all this, movement competency? What could have happened? And that's still, maybe that's the, dad, playoff dad in me, like, oh, I could have been an NFL star. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you never know. So my goal when I went to Chiro school and got out was like, I don't ever want that to happen to another kid or adult where they just get lackluster care because they didn't know, right, what like top notch was. So that's what drove me, is like, what could have been. Yeah.
And I've had conversations with you on the side, and for people that that'll be listening to this episode, you're really passionate about the way that these young kids are being cared for in the athletic space. Do you think that has something to do with just the fact that, maybe when you were a child that you were going through this really difficult thing and you just didn't feel like the level of care was what it should be until you met this chiropractor? Is that kind of what drives you to help these young kids today?
Yeah. And if I'm completely pulling the kimono back, I talk about this in my book, like, my parents let me make the decision on, do you want to be in this cast that covers one whole leg, the other half of your leg, and your pelvis for the better part of 8 months? Or do you want this, like, I was the 9th kid in the US to get this titanium rod put in my femur. They let me decide.
Wow.
So there was this level of like, why'd you let me decide? But probably wasn't a, right choice. There was just a choice. So that's kind of one part of it, is being equipped with the best information, when big decisions need to be made for somebody's health at an early stage in their life. So I always want to make sure that that's like number one. Two is I think more and more people are becoming aware of this within the, the medical realm is for a long time, the medical provider has come from a place of like an ivory tower, right? Like whatever they said was gospel. And well, if that's the case, you've got to be very careful with how you handle information if people are just going to take it at face value. And that's what, happened to me is like, oh, this is the way it is. And then that story changed. And then lo and behold, it wasn't the best information out there ever. So yeah, we see still, this was now what? That was 31, 32 years ago. Gosh, it hasn't changed a whole lot, right? We see that the standard of care is not amazing across the board. It's better than it was. We see kids maybe even worse now, right? With the over specialization of sports, and they're doing so much more and they're more unhealthy. So it's changed, but it hasn't really changed for the better necessarily, right? It's just different.
Right.
And I hate to say that, and I don't want to sound negative, but like that gives me more, fire under my feet of like, God, let's try to get the best information in front of these, everybody, not just, youth athletes, but youth athletes, their parents, and then all of our patients of like, hey, this is a partnership between you and I, the physician and the patient. There's information at hand, and then we need to make a decision together that best suits you. And that's not me giving dissenting advice and telling you what to do. That I think that's the wrong approach in the medical world.
Yeah, and that's an unbelievable segue into kind of what my next topic is you talk about creating an ecosystem approach to human health. What does that mean in practical terms for your patients?
Yeah, the practicality is sometimes outweighed by the crashing wave of how many things are impacting this ecosystem approach. What I mean by that is, I'm sitting in here in an office under artificial light, indoors with air conditioning. I just ate food that I didn't go kill myself. And yeah, I exercised this morning, but was it enough to like really offset, me sitting in this chair talking to you? So our lifestyle is not supporting the healthiest version of most of us, right? As organisms, it's just not. Like that's how society's set up. So we have to work really hard to be healthy, right? You have to go out and do hard things because our jobs and our lifestyles don't do that. Right. Even if you eat the best food in the world, it's still not as good as it was maybe 50 years ago, just based on agriculture and things. So there's all these things that are weighing on people, and it's becoming more and more commonplace to know. But people are usually coming to me for a musculoskeletal thing, right? An ankle sprain, a shoulder issue, their low back hurts. But what's become more and more common is it's not as it used to be where I did a squat and I blew my back out. It's like, well, what even caused this? And that's very hard to get people to wrap their head around when they come to somebody like us for a specific intervention. Hey, I hurt this, do this thing to my body and get me to feel better. And it's like, your body is having a hard time dealing with the recovery of this thing because of all these other things, right? Like food and water and exercise. But I think when you get people to realize that, you're going to amplify your results as a practitioner, right? Because you work on their health, not just their ankle or their shoulder or their back, and you're working on them as a person, not just an ankle or back. But that, I tell this to all our students and interns all the time. All of our tools, in my world, our tools are like adjusting and soft tissue techniques and exercise. They're going to become less and less effective as people become more and more unhealthy. And that's, nobody wants to talk about that, but it's like, maybe we just need to have more conversations about health. And we're still doing our stuff, but like, if I get a guy in here that's 200 pounds overweight and his, labs are terrible and he, doesn't exercise, like, yeah, his back's going to hurt.
Right.
Lots of things hurt.
So
he doesn't feel good. But then it makes you feel like, well, should I be treating his back and getting him out of pain, or should I have that conversation? Because maybe I'm just kind of a different version of like an opioid, right? I can make you feel really good by doing things. And it's like, did I really help you, or did I just kind of get you further along? And that's what I don't want to do at this phase of my career. It's transitioned a little bit from that initial fire under my feet of help the youth athlete. Let's, empower people with information. Now it's like, hey, we have an unhealthy population overall. Like we have to have different conversations than we did 10 years ago, and that's tough.
It is. And that's incredible. I mean, I hope that a lot of people will dig into health and the food that we eat and the way that our bodies move. I know that just in my year working with you guys at the farm and at the gym too, I feel like a completely different person, but we also coupled that with a complete diet shift. We eat all whole foods now. We don't eat any refined sugar, very few refined grains. And if they are, they're typically, going to be whole. Um, and it's just incredible to hear you as a physician say that when, you don't get that advice from a duck in a box, right? It's just, it's here's a pill, here's some medicine for that. So let's get into your TEDx conversation, because I know a lot of this kind of comes back to that. You had an unbelievable talk in the TEDx Birmingham, and again, we'll link that for our listeners to take a look at. Tell us a little bit about that. I know that we were talking a lot about the connection with human health and environmental health, and what are you seeing there, Beau?
Yeah, so that my mentor, who's a chiropractor, gave me a lot of crap for doing an environmental talk when he's like, you could have just talked about chiropractic, become this like domain expert. I was like, but same thing. Like, was that the conversation that furthers the general populace getting the most help?
Mm.
So yeah, I basically told the story of you've listened to the talk and they will too, of like me littering when I lived in Alaska, which this is how I was. I don't want to say I was raised. Like that sounds terrible, but like the thought wasn't in my head. I threw a
Right.
soccer
Of
stick out.
course.
My sister yells at me, and she's like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I didn't even know." But this is like the perfect parallel between like health. You're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that like that food's bad for me, or I need to do this, or whatever it is." That's what I was trying to hit home on. Is if you take care of you, right, from a health standpoint. And I think of this in like, if we think of like a Tootsie Pop, there's levels of health. So you have, if you're familiar with strength training, we would call it like a microcycle, mesocycle, macrocycle, like these bigger layers that move out. So the micro or the smallest one is you. You got to take care of your own health. We talk about this all the time
Right.
of like, put your oxygen mask on first, right? You got to take care of your health so you can take care of your family. Yeah, those are all true euphemisms. Then secondarily, I would say it goes all the way from the family to the community is that next layer, right? You're healthy, so you're being an example for people. You're also able to do things for people because of your health. So you're a living example of what's good. And that means, picking up trash. You're able to go walk through the park and actually not get out of breath and, pick up litter. You see somebody throw something on the ground, pick it up for them, but maybe, you say something, I don't know. But there's that layer. Then the biggest one is obviously, global. And it can be daunting, especially nowadays. You're like, oh, all these things are going on. You're not going to, I'm being honest, you and I are not going to change that. I,
Right.
I would love to think I am going to have that much impact, but it's like, if everybody started with themselves and had a ripple effect, those ripples start bouncing into one another. And pretty soon you create some vibrations, and that's what creates change. That was the goal of the talk, is like, take care of yourself. And then God, everybody else will pay attention. And I mean, you and I live in Alabama. So anybody that is listening that doesn't, it was eye opening for me. So we live in Chelsea, super nice. It's pretty well taken care of. My dad moved down here to Carbon Hill, Alabama. No knock on Carbon Hill, but I took a turn off the highway onto this country road, and it looked like somebody just opened up trash cans,
Mm.
right, and just littered everywhere. And I'm not, again, no knock. You look at the people that live on this road. I mean, everybody's obese. Everybody's, eating food that is like, all packaged, the worst kind of food. And you're like, well, maybe there are parallels between like caring for the environment, caring for yourself. It's just a general apathetic approach. And, that's at the heart of it. And some people get offended by that. And it's like, well, there's so many things that are interwoven there that you basically, it just comes down to, they don't want to look in the mirror. Like, why would you throw trash on the ground? Same reason you put trash in your body.
Mm.
it's,
Yeah.
it's no different,
It's crazy, man. So let's talk about rethinking rehab and the art of assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think that the industry gets rehab and evaluation so wrong?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to something, I said earlier, of this kind of approach, what we would call a mechanistic approach, which basically means if you come in for a shoulder issue, we'll treat your shoulder, right? So like, hey, Tyler came in with a shoulder, pain, and we treat your shoulder, which can be that we're not paying attention to other lifestyle factors. Maybe we're not paying attention to the fact that you're like, dude, I'm very scared of getting an acupuncture needle put in my arm,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, and we're like, no, that's the best thing for you. And we just, completely, uh, disarm every rebuttal that you have for us. But we get it wrong because we treat parts and we over specialize, right? So if you have say you're seeing me and you're a little bit overweight, and then I find out your blood sugar's not awesome. You know, the typical play would be, hey, you have to go to your primary care physician. Let's say it's real bad. Well, then they're going to refer you to an endocrinologist, right? And then maybe you come back to me and you're like, my back's no better. I have to get an MRI. Then it's like a spine specialist, ortho. It's like you silo off the medical world, and pretty soon you just divide a person who is a system of systems into parts. And it's like, that's not how you treat a person. You know, if we go back 80 years ago, the family doctor was delivering babies, doing minor surgery, taking care of, you know, the common cold and flu and stuff. And that's gone. Right. And we've overcomplicated medicine at the detriment of the person that's in front of you. And that's what we mean is like rethinking rehab is you have to treat the organism, the person in front of you, which is treating what we would call the biopsychosocial. So their bio is their body, the psycho is the mind, and the emotional is how those things kind of tie together. But that wasn't done for the last 20, 30 years, right? It was a very siloed specialist approach that I'm not saying has led to America being more unhealthy, but it sure didn't help.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So you said that your goal is to leave every patient better than before. What does that actually look like?
Yeah. So if we get really granular in our office, I have a little if you remember what a pundit square is, so genetics, right? You got these little 4 squares. And at the top, we have basically in pain and out of pain on the top of the squares. And then on the left-hand side, it would be unhealthy and healthy. Everybody's entering the office in one of those fashions, right? Usually in our office, it's in pain. That's why they're there. And then it's going to be they're pretty healthy or they're unhealthy. Ideal world, they're exiting our office where? No pain and healthy. And that's just running the gambit of, hey, I can have conversations. I have other tools. I have team members within the community, you know, dietitians, functional medicine doctors, a gym, to send these people to kind of be a continuation of their healthcare team, or, you know, in most, you know, times, and this is something that can be a bit contentious within the medical community, is like people don't have anybody at the center of their care anymore. That used to be the primary care physician. A lot of people are running around with no PCPs due to all sorts of reasons. So we tend to be that person for a lot of people, not like we're prescribing medications or telling them, you know, how to take care of their blood sugar necessarily, but it's like, hey, can we get you over here? Can we look this up or see the specialist? That's what I mean is we need to be doing more than getting people out of pain, right? That can be difficult in its own right, but that's usually pretty easy. Then we want to get them moving better. Then we want to get them eating better. Then we want them sleeping better. And we can just keep stacking these things. And pretty soon they don't need me that much because they're healthier.
That's right. It's funny because you're in a business where, I mean, your goal is to get people to where they don't need you, right? And I guess that's where the referrals come into play. You guys do a really good job of people get better. I tell people all the time, before I came to y'all's clinic, I was struggling with lower back pain. It was impacting my golf game. I was playing a good bit of tennis at the time. Really struggled like doing like basic things like squats. And I remember coming in and working with you, and you know, we did dadgum dead bugs and a lot of core work. And I just remember being baffled when you prescribed me to my video stuff that the pain is totally unrelated to the actual area, right? Like, I'm probably not explaining that properly, but I just, my own personal experience, so shocked that my core was having such a massive impact on my lower back.
No, you're hitting the nail on the head of, yeah, people have injuries, right? So you sprain your ankle on the trail, you tweak your back doing a squat. Can you have damage or an actual injury? For sure. And that's usually occurring, but it's in tandem with other stuff, right? How you moved prior to that injury, how you move after the injury, your beliefs about that injury. And, you know, we're always looking at, well, how did you compensate, or what were you not able to do before they either led to it or prolonged the injury that you're dealing with? And that's like the key to kind of rehab from the diagnostic approach, rather than being like, you have an ankle sprain. Well, here's our protocol, and here's your piece of paper to take home. Well, that's protocolish. That's not, you know, an organismal or individual approach. Yeah, that's what we do, but that's also what makes it fun for us. Like you said, I'm trying to put myself out of business every day. And the way I try to do that is like solve the puzzle in front of me.
Right.
But that's literally, and this is where I think you've done a good job marketing. When people tell the referral, what you'd want him to without you overtly saying it. So when people say, hey, I tell him all the time, like, he doesn't want you to come back. He's like trying to put himself out of business. Go there. I promise you, you're not going to be there like 20 visits or a whole year. Yeah. And I'm like, basically, yeah.
Right. And I think something that's amazing about what the farm does is, and talking to Dr. Alex over there is, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, please, Beau, but I don't feel like you guys go like, let's adjust first. Let's start cracking backs and popping necks. It's from my personal experience at your clinic, it is let's get to the root of the issue, right? Let's optimize what's going on in your body. And if we need to adjust, then we will.
Yeah. And again, for people outside of our profession, this can be a hard area to kind of understand maybe, but like adjusting to us, right? And a chiropractic adjustment is just getting motion into a joint. You can do the same thing by mobilizing, right? If you foam roll your mid back, you're kind of doing the same thing, just in a different way, but it's a tool, right? So soft tissue, massage, exercise, dry needling, acupuncture, cupping, they're all tools. No different than if you took your car to the mechanic and all he had was a wrench and you're like, I'm pretty sure I need air in the tires. He's like, yeah, I get that, but I got this wrench. And you're like, I don't know if I'm in the right place. That's what most people are doing, right? And when you look at it like that, that makes sense. And it's like, how in the world could I sell you that a wrench is going to like solve all your problems? It's not. It's impossible. But when you need that wrench, it's the most important tool I got. And how do you determine that? Assessment and diagnostics. And trying to be what I always say when I'm teaching is, don't be a rehab specialist first, be a physician first. So don't use your tools based on what you're dogmatic about. Like, hey, and in our world, we have all these techniques and stuff. Like, I'm this kind of a guy or gal. It's like, do what's best for him. And if you're not the best thing for him, you need to be able to refer out. And that's the other part of like being at the center of their care, is building referrals and a network that basically you just amplify your effect by being a very good referrer. Yeah.
So like, let's go back to obviously like where a lot of this started is you've got this trauma as a child, you break your femur, life slows down for you. And you got conflicting information because you're 9, right? It's hard. You're still developing your core memories and all that stuff. But I feel like it's really stuck with you and slingshot you into where you are right now, as far as building your business, your brand, and the things that you do, the way that you take care of your body. Where is the line between self-optimization and self-obsession?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of that one nowadays, aren't we? But in social media, again, it's just like anything nowadays. You see the crazy polarized side of things on social media, maybe, but there's a couple biohackers out there right now that are spending, millions of dollars to try to live as long as they can. And funny enough, one of those guys just aged himself supposedly by 7 years by taking a wonder drug. And so I approach it this way. I want to do everything I can to be healthy, but I also want to use my body, and I'm not going to live in a bubble. And that's, right. I call it plastic wrapped health. I'm not going to not go bomb down a trail or mountain bike because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself. I'm not going to not have a glass of wine or eat pizza because I'm like, I got to stay perfect. Like I don't think that's realistic. And I don't think for most people, depending on what you're dealing with, right? Whether we're talking food or alcohol or exercise, we all have our things that we have to abstain from or can't do due to allergies. I mean, if I have a peanut allergy, I'm not just going to crush peanuts because I like it. But I wouldn't even say it's a fine line. I think it's a pretty defined line. Mm-hmm. I think what we see nowadays is, and I live in this world of like ultra endurance events, ultra marathons, and those things are absolutely not healthy.
Right. Yeah.
There's not a good thing about running 32 miles in one stint for your body, but there probably is a benefit for your mind of doing something hard that you didn't think you could do, facing adversity. There's lots of ex-addicts in these sports, and maybe they've just traded one, addiction for another. Absolutely. So there's these trade-offs of, well, I might need this for this stage of my life, but if I want to do that for 30 years, then it becomes no different than if you had, a glass of wine's not bad. If you drink a whole bottle every night, it's not good anymore.
It's not good. I mean, that was exactly what I did when I stopped drinking. I just went into this full body optimization deal. Like, I was obsessed with like trying to get cold plunges and saunas and just doing all the stuff. But at the end of the day, like I just wanted to feel better.
Well, and what we see, what I think what we're getting at with this question too is are people actually doing fundamentals of health, or are they wanting to pull the fancy bells and whistles and the things that actually don't move us up the mountain that much? So like cold plunging is great, sauna is great. Obviously, we know exercise, like all these things are great, but like, what do you, it's no different than if you came in for something and I want to give you, you come in and sprained your ankle yesterday. I'm like, hey, why don't we remove gluten? And you're like, this is what I need today. You
Yeah,
might need it, but not right now.
I gotcha.
So if you need to lose 50 pounds, I don't know if cold plunging every day is the biggest lever to, pull.
Right.
But I think that's what we're seeing right now is people want to do the easier, lower lying stuff or really fancy, flashy stuff. And it's like, hey, eating well, exercising and sleeping well and having good relationships, like that's never going to change. Like that, it's going to live on forever.
Let's talk about you're a great writer, and you wrote a book called The Age of Movement. What inspired that book?
So the main thing, again, going back to the youth athlete being on, at the middle of my crosshairs, early in my career. In our office, we talk a lot about how we develop as kids and then how that follows us into adulthood. So that's what the age of movement is a precipice of is, hey, let's start in utero and go all the way out into, 60, 80, 90 years old and talk about what is the normal expectation from a movement in particular health standpoint, right? Like what's normal for a 3-month-old baby to be able to do a 10 month. So this will be a great example. You have kids, I got kids. So if you go to a pediatrician nowadays, they will ask around 6 months if your baby's sitting up. Babies can't sit up at 6 months. They're physically not able to yet,
Right.
via the questionnaire. And again, I'm not knocking the pediatrician. What I'm saying is we have these like weird non-uniform like norms within the medical field of like what kids and young adults and preteens and adults are supposed to be doing with their diet and their movement and exercise. And it's like, well, is that good information? Right? This gets back to, well, is it good information or is it bad information? Who's delivering it? So that was one big theme of the book is like, hey, let's put out what's normal from birth to death of what the expectation is. The other part of the book is, well, let's also talk about how the world is not set up for a win. And that's the play on terms, right? The age of movement of what age are you at in your movement life, but also the age of movement of, hey, the time we're in now, we need more movement in our lives because we have the biggest sedentary population in the world. And like, we can't just get up and all run marathons. We've got to start somewhere. So I kind of give a strong framework of what I would suggest based on different parts of your life of what would be the best way to approach that.
Wow. What do you think about like movement and getting your body going and mental health as someone who's struggled with depression, anxiety, imposter syndrome? If it's a mental health challenge, I feel like I've faced it. What do you see in your profession as far as mental health and movement and how they work together?
Yeah, this is a big theme in the book. So I talk about, the book came out in 2021, and at that point, especially post COVID, we had seen a big jump in this. But if we talk about, the adolescent uptick in anxiety and depression, I mean, it's insane, right? And then if we talk about what nobody wants to talk about, the suicide rate,
Yep.
in that group is growing at the fastest rate of any group, and at the fastest rate of any group at any time in history, right?
Wow.
Since we've been recording this.
Man.
So when you think about those things, then you have to start thinking about correlations and causations. And those are very hard to, pull apart. But when we look at things like, okay, the youth population is moving so much less, right? And that comes from both exercise, but play and work than, generations, just my generation, right? So basically 2 decades prior, they're moving less. They have less social interactions. They have more digital interface, right? Not just social interactions on, a digital interface, but they're on a computer more. And then you start to think, well, are those correlated? Are they causative? And I don't think you can unwind those. I don't think anybody would say they're not correlated, especially with the uptick in anxiety and depression during COVID on a general population basis. So one of my beliefs, and I have to say belief because, yeah, there's evidence out there, peer-reviewed evidence, but not a huge body, that when we see anxiety and we see depression, it is a physiology first, psychology second problem. And I know a lot of people would disagree with me. Like, you're not a, psychologist or psychiatrist. I know I'm not, but I live in the physiology world from a movement standpoint. If we look at, gut health and immunology and where we create neurotransmitters, then I have to start thinking about, well, if I don't have a great diet and I don't exercise, how do I create the neurotransmitters to have a stable, balanced mood?
Wow.
But now I also see it firsthand in my kids that if my daughter doesn't eat for 3 hours, she turns into the meanest little troll of a 5-year-old I've ever seen. And you literally feed her and she changes. And I mean,
Yeah.
I've also seen her eat, and I'm not a crazy Cairo red dye. I've also seen her eat candy and go absolutely nuts outside of the sugar. And you're like, okay, well, there's something there. So we see all this ADHD and all this. And I'm like, yeah, I am sure there are true clinical diagnoses of depression, anxiety, ADHD, schizophrenia, things that are actually a functioning issue within the person's either psychology or actual structure. But I think it's a lot of what we talked about before, these systems of systems, and we're focusing on the wrong system. So somebody goes in with anxiety and we do what? Prescribe them medication for anxiety. They go into depression. We don't even talk about diet or exercise. We give them a medication for that or suggest therapy. And there's a very famous psychologist or psychiatrist, Daniel Amen. He runs the Amen clinics. It's 11 clinics across the U.S. And he had a very good point. I think this will hit home. Is he goes, when somebody goes to their doctor and says, I'm depressed, we don't suss out that depression could be a multitude of depression. And he goes, basically think about it like this. If you went to a cardiologist and said, my heart hurts, and he gave everybody nitroglycerin, you'd be like, what? But yet you go in and say you're depressed. What's everybody get? SSRIs.
A pill.
And he goes, you could be depressed for 35 different reasons, but yet we don't try to figure out the underlying cause or root. And he goes, so then we see, some people respond, some people don't. And it's just that we're not asking the right questions. It's really gets to me because I have kids now and I'm like, what's going to happen to them? Like, is it something I can help? Is it, a big environmental, as we said before, shift? What can I do as a parent? What can I do as a physician? And then what can I do for myself? I mean, we all deal with this stuff,
I think people listening that have kids will really resonate with this. I mean, that was the catalyst of our lifestyle shift from the food that we were eating. And my wife, Allie, went down a rabbit hole because our daughter took after me and has a very ADHD personality. And it's a gift. It really is. It's a gift for her. I feel like it's a gift for me. But the one thing that we noticed is that her attitude, her abilities, everything that she was doing on a daily basis functioned around what was her diet that day. Was she eating candy? Was she eating a bunch of carbohydrates, right? Because 5 and 6 year olds, unfortunately, we can't get them to just eat a bunch of spinach. We can't, the leafy greens just don't work. So we got to figure out a way to get these types of things into her diet. But that's incredible because we use our kids as guinea pigs, but I'm sitting here like self-reflecting on this conversation. And I'm like, it makes sense why I feel better when I eat, when I move, right? When I'm having conversations like this. Like I think that there's medicine, not just from a functional movement perspective, but in community, having these tough conversations, really digging in. So that's incredible stuff, Beau.
If you've ever heard the name Dan Buettner, so he's one of the pioneers of the whole blue zones, which there's a lot of debate and contention around blue zones. But a blue zone is a world in the area where it has a large populace of centenarians or people that live over 100 years. And there's basically, we talk about in my book, but there's like 8 to 9 categories of what creates like these blue zones, right? The foods they eat and how much they move and all these things, spirituality. The one that trumps all of those time and time again is basically personal or relationships outside of your marriage. It's basically having good friends, right? It's having a community, and the people that have a community tend to live the longest and also live the happiest and longest. So food. So again, what we're saying there is what you have to be a healthy person. You have to be able to move and, not be out of breath when you walk upstairs and all these things to then be able to go interact with the community. But the community is the thing that feeds back to your health. So it's like it's a reflecting pool of health, and then it kind of it grows. Right. But it is not the people that obsess about health and silo themselves off and, live in a dark cave on social media that are just living their best life. It's people that are out in their community and talking to people and, doing things like this.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, before we start wrapping up this episode, one thing that I always want to ask folks is, what is your definition of success, Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's the same with a lot of people. It's changed over time. It probably honestly changes with me every couple months.
Same.
It this I'm going to be honest. When I was in undergrad and got out of school, I was making a bunch of money. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't come from a lot of money, and that's what I went after was money.
Hmm.
Then I kind of got into positions where I made pretty good money, and I was like, man, there are people around me that are not healthy, and I was like, I really enjoy and want to be healthy. So then it was, okay, I want to live by example, right? And all the things we said of what drove me in practice. So a success would have been being that guide for somebody in terms of health.
Mm.
Now it's changing a bit of, I have to be more, or not have to, I want to be more of a guidepost, not only for my patients and my family, but now I have employees, right? I have other
Right.
doctors that I'm
Absolutely.
mentoring. So I guess maybe I could distill it down to this: is like success for me is being, yeah, financial success fixes financial problems, but it's more of being a strong mentor, in particular within the health and wellness field. And that goes from the professional side and the patient side. And I think if I could do that, I will have financial success by default. But if I focus on that, I think I will be successful.
I think that's amazing. And, of course, as the more people I sit down with, a lot of people want to, it is financial success is not bad. It provides flexibility and freedom to a degree, which allows you to do your research, right? And write your
Write a
books and
book.
host
Yeah.
your podcast, right? Because if you don't have a little bit of freedom and flexibility, then none of the stuff that you've done would be able to exist. So, man, that's incredible. All right, we're going to wrap up the show. I love to do a little section where we just do some rapid fire questions, some things that I enjoy. So quickly, one book you recommend over and over.
Yeah. So I have a shelf of books back here. This is our practice book. So if you're watching a video of this, out of all the books, The Alchemist.
Okay.
So it's Paulo Coelho, very, very popular, right? Will Smith probably popularized this like 7 years ago when he brought it up. The reason I do is because it's a story of transformation, which if anybody's a giant nerd, they also just proved that they could change lead to gold, which is alchemy. They just did this, which is insane. Besides the point, it's a book of transformation of what you can do by basically having a belief in yourself, but also having a little bit of like ability to dream is really what it
Mm-hmm.
is, right? Without going too woo of like, they think they can turn lead into gold, and really that's what the guy's after is money. But it ends up being he's on a personal transformation of becoming something that he never thought he could. I, in particular, give that to a lot of docs and interns in here because we live in a kind of black and white medical world. And it's like, man, you got to break outside of the walls of that and kind of become the best you. And you just don't know what that is sometimes. It's something that you might not expect. And that's what that book's about.
Love it. All right. Cold plunge or sauna?
Sauna for sure. I lived in Alaska and Colorado, and I've got cold way too many times. I still do it, but I just don't like being cold that much. So,
I feel like there's more science that says heat exposure is better for you than cold exposure. So,
especially, yeah, and I would agree with that. And then, yeah, I just don't like being
right.
cold. That's why I moved to Alabama.
All right. We got a couple more. What's the number one thing you think people misunderstand about chiropractors?
Oh boy. I could probably say something funny or try to be serious. I honestly think the number one thing they misunderstand about us is that now that everybody is still running the old playbook. So the
Right.
old playbook, the 1980s chiropractor was we adjust you and your health overall, right? Like nerves run everything in the body, philosophy, your immune system, your neurology, like everything in the body is going to get better with an adjustment. I'm here to say that's not true. If it
Yeah.
was, I would not be talking to Tyler. I'd be on an island someplace because I made $10 million a year. It's
Right.
just not true. But that is still being, said by some. It's a tool, like I said. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest misunderstanding still.
All right. You got a week's paid vacation, all expenses paid. We're talking food. We're talking lodging. You going to the beach or you going to the lake?
Oh, lake all day long.
Yeah, me too.
I get
All right.
bored on the beach. I can't
I do
sit
too.
still. And you'd be like, well, you get bored at the lake, but I'm going to swim. I'm going to run around that lake. I'm going to put a boat on it. Yeah. I'm going to
I'm
do
getting
all
it
that stuff.
exactly. I got options there. All right. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing?
Yeah. So I'd be a professional photographer. I'd still do that for fun. And maybe that's what I'll do as a retirement job if I ever retire. But yeah, I think I'd be hopefully in Africa somewhere tracking down a lion or maybe getting eaten by one as my last photo. So, yeah.
I love it. Well, listen, Bo, I thank you so much for being on the show today, man. This conversation has been one of my favorites by far, and just all the things that you've done to help people. I thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, and I wish you all the success with it.
Thanks for tuning in to The Other Side of Success. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear the unpolished truth. Got someone in mind whose story needs to be told? Shoot me a message or a referral. I'm always looking for real people with real stories to join the conversation. We're all on this journey together, and the more we talk about the real stuff, the stronger we get. Until next time, keep grinding, stay honest, and don't forget, success always has another side.